Someday all these things of the world are to be left behind. Whatever you have earned through your occupying yourself in the worldly activities. Nothing comes with you when you leave this body. When death comes, you have to leave them everything, even forcefully. The one abiding reality is God. Duties will be there always. Is there any end to that? As long as this creation lasts, duties and responsibilities will exist. So what is the use of crying about the duties? In the midst of all these duties, you will have to make some time to call upon Divine Lord, or to meditate on your true self. Otherwise you will come to grief. There is not so much danger if one can hold on to God. It is very necessary to remember His name, to remember Him, to meditate on the truth. With one hand hold on constantly to the lotus feet of God, and with the other perform the duties of the world. When all your duties are over, you should hold lotus feet of God to your heart with both the hands. Without worrying about what others do, you have to remain occupied with your own spiritual practice and duties. Reading of scriptures daily constitutes a form of spiritual exercise. So you should analyze your mind and see whether you have been able to cover every bit of work with the Spirit of God, and judge whether the duties you are performing are for His sake or for the propitiation of your spurious self. Take refuge in the Lord, then attend to the duties of life. You can withstand much better the storms and stresses of the world. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, carry on your duties in the world just as servants and maidservants do their work in the houses of their masters. They serve their masters and do all their work, but all the time they think of their own people living in their village homes. In the same way, do all your duties, whatever you have to do in this world, but your mind should always be fixed on God. That's the way. You must all read Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. Very, very important. I have seen in Bangalore, one of our old students became Vice Chancellor of Bangalore University. A very good person, well-charactered, follower of Gandhiji, great student of Vivekananda. When he became the Vice Chancellor, every year he would take several thousand copies of Karma Yoga and distribute it to the students. These ideas must be scattered everywhere. Spread the good ideas. It will minimize the confusion. So Swami Vivekananda in his Karma Yoga class very nicely dealt with the subject duty. I wish you, all of you, read that Karma Yoga. He says in that Karma Yoga that the ordinary idea of duty is on the lower plane. Nevertheless, all of us have to do our duty. Yet, we may see this peculiar sense of duty sometimes is very often a great cause of misery. Duty becomes a disease with us. It drags us ever forward. It catches hold of us and makes our whole life miserable. It is the bane of human life. This idea of duty is a midday summer sun which scorches the innermost soul of mankind. In a way, people become slaves to duty, slaves. Duty leaves them no time to say prayers, no time to bathe. Duty is ever on them. They go out and work. Duty is on them. They come home and think of the work for the next day. Duty is on them. It is living a slave's life, at last dropping down in the street and dying in harness like a horse. These are the words of Vivekananda. The only true duty is to be unattached and to work as free beings, to give up all work unto God. All our duties are His. Blessed are we that we are ordered out here. We serve our time. Whether we do it ill or well, who knows it? If we do it well, we don't get the fruits. If we do it ill, neither do we get the care. Be at rest, be free and work. This kind of freedom is a very hard thing to attain. How easy it is to interpret slavery as duty, the morbid attachment of flesh for flesh as duty. Men go out into the world and struggle and fight for money and for any other thing to which they get attached. If you ask them why they do it, they say it is duty. It is an absurd greed for gold and gain, and they try to cover it with a few flowers. What is duty after all? It is really the impulsion of the flesh, of our attachment. And when our attachment has become established, we call it duty. It is, so to say, a sort of chronic disease. When it is acute, we call it disease. When it is chronic, we call it nature. It is a disease. So, when attachment becomes chronic, we baptize it with the highest sounding name of duty. We strew flowers upon it, trumpets sound for it. Sacred texts are said over it. And then the whole world fights and men earnestly rob each other for this duty's sake. Duty is good to the extent that it checks brutality. In a way, duty is bondage. Anyway, this subject has been very elaborately discussed by Swami Vivekananda in Karma Yoga. Please read that. At least you will know where you are. Everybody will do work. Lord Krishna also did work. He said, I can't stay for a moment without doing any work. But I have no duty as such. I incessantly work for the sake of the creation. I work without any attachment. That's the meaning of saying work for work's sake. Do it efficiently, offer it to God. Finished. So, the sum total of all these sayings is that how far the mind has been put on God, how far the mind is on the world. Your spirituality depends on that. The quality of the mind is important to have the experience of spirituality. So, that is the meaning of Sri Ramakrishna telling, even though you may be working in the world, you must always be concentrating your attention on God. Just as that village lady, though she was engaging herself in talking to customers, taking care of the child, yet her whole mind was seriously concentrated on the bezel of the husking machine. She has to be extremely careful. In the same way, we have to be extremely careful in keeping our mind on God wholeheartedly and then doing the other things of the world. That's the technique of living this life. Otherwise, you can't avoid back and forth coming to this world. No use of convincing yourself, giving all sorts of reasons for the things what we do. Truth remains same. If you want to achieve the truth, if you want to experience happiness and peace, you have to adopt all these teachings of Sri Ramakrishna very carefully in your life. That's all what I want to say about the last class reading. Let us pray to him. bestowing grace upon us. To give fulfillment to our spiritual aspirations. Studying Sri Ramakrishna's teachings is itself spiritual practice. Accepting Sri Ramakrishna indicates that we are determined to move forward in our spiritual life. Sri Ramakrishna's whole life is the life of spirituality. So, whatever Sri Ramakrishna has said, every bit of his saying is remarkably spiritual. It has got immense spiritual power. Sri Ramakrishna, we always look upon God as Jagannatha, Jagat Pita, Jagat Bandhu, Jagat Sakha, Father of the universe, Mother of the universe, Friend of the universe. The whole creation is the projection of God. God in the form of the universe, in the form of the created beings. The substance is God Himself. So, Sri Ramakrishna, when he has taken this human form, out of his infinite love towards all the beings, he is very much concerned about the spiritual aspirations of all sections of people. He was more considerate towards people who are living in the world. He was rather more strict towards those spiritual aspirants who had devoted whole time to spiritual practices. Sri Ramakrishna knew very well that householders as such had to pass through lots of difficulties and how to help them to come out of that mess. So Sri Ramakrishna gives practical solutions. We should pay clear attention to those things and follow in the life. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling, it's not somebody who is of no importance telling these things. Sri Ramakrishna, the veritable manifestation of the Supreme Spirit, who himself practiced spirituality and attained the final goal, when he speaks out, he really means what he speaks. It is not simply theoretical assertion. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling to the household disciples, because now and then the doubt comes upon the householders. How it is possible for them to turn to God? Again and again, in so many ways, questions are put to Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna was very much concerned about their welfare. And that's why during the weekends, lots of household disciples would come there. And Sri Ramakrishna would speak to them whole day, understanding their problems and giving the solutions appropriate to them. So he is telling, it's all right, you are leading a householder life, but you must underline one important thing. That is, you must enter into householder life after attaining knowledge. He explains that further. How it is very important that we should acquire knowledge first. He gives the example, if the milk of the mind is kept in the water of the world, they get mixed up. On the other hand, turn the milk into curd and extract butter from it by churning it in solitude. Then keep the butter in the water of the world. It's the most significant teaching. All the householders must understand the importance of this teaching. If you have understood this, your spiritual life becomes very easy and becomes fruitful. So what he meant by saying this is that spiritual discipline is necessary. It is more necessary for the householders than the monks. Because the mind is always downward. It will be extremely difficult if a person doesn't practice spiritual disciplines regularly to maintain the spiritual aspirations in life. Even incarnations, how severe disciplines they performed themselves. Even though their body is pure, their mind is pure, yet they performed disciplines. Sri Ramakrishna tells again and again, whatever may be the circumstances, don't talk about the circumstance. You must engage yourself in spiritual discipline. These are the words of Sri Ramakrishna. Without devoting oneself to the disciplines, one can never make any spiritual progress in life. It's only through spiritual practices we attain knowledge and devotion. They won't come simply. You have to struggle to open the gates of knowledge and devotion. It is through sadhana the heart should be purified and a new realm will open. So, this is the advice given by Sri Ramakrishna to the householders. Never for a moment forget this principle of doing spiritual disciplines. Very important. Spiritual efforts must be carried on till we see light, more light, not simply glimpses, till we attain God, till we gain His vision, till we talk to Him. Sri Ramakrishna is speaking, considering God has definite forms, and from that standpoint of view he is telling, because it's very difficult for the householders to think of God as formless, but then to concentrate on one divine form and to establish different relationship with the God Supreme, and then all your spiritual aspirations will be fulfilled. So what is needed here is that we must develop that taste. Then everything will be nice. To develop taste. Once the mind tastes sweetness in the thought of God, there is nothing to fear. But we must develop that taste. Swami Brahmanji, one of the foremost disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, one day told the devotees, well, by practicing meditation and japa, you may progress a little. But then comes a period of dryness. It's a very important point, we should all note it. Period of dryness will come. It seems that the doors are entirely closed. At that time, never give up the spiritual disciplines which you have been doing all the time. It is very important and necessary that you stick on to your spiritual practices with infinite patience. By so doing, you will find one day that all of a sudden the doors are opened. What a great joy it is then. Swami Brahmanji says, in spiritual life, many such thresholds have to be crossed. you think you can get God simply? You have to prepare yourself properly to receive God. At another time, Brahmanji said, do you think that there is any fixed catalogued price of so much austerity, so much japam, so much charity, etc. for God realization? None can force realization out of him. But if you don't keep up a regular spiritual struggle, you will not be able to hold the experience when it comes. An illustration is given. A man is standing in the courtyard of the house. He wants to go to the roof of the building. There's a staircase, but instead of climbing this structure step by step, he decides to jump with great force. What happens? He is seriously hurt. So it is with spiritual life. One should follow gradual path. Just as there are laws governing the physical world, so are there laws governing the spiritual world also. It is true we can't buy God. His vision comes only through His grace. But then does this mean that we shouldn't practice spiritual disciplines? Certainly we must practice. Why should we keep on practicing spiritual disciplines? Otherwise, passions will create havoc in us. Passions. Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsarya. All these are dreadful passions. So, to get rid of this danger, it is necessary to maintain our spiritual discipline. Spiritual discipline. Without spiritual discipline, no spiritual life. They go together. Spiritual life means spiritual discipline. Spiritual discipline means spiritual life. They go together. So, spiritual discipline means self-effort. It is absolutely necessary to success in spiritual life. Sri Ramakrishna said, you want to eat rice? Suppose you sit down somewhere and say, wood contains fire, fire cooks rice. But just saying that, does it cook the rice? Could you eat it? You must get 2 pieces of wood, and by causing friction you must bring out the fire. Then the rice must be cooked. Afterwards you have to eat. So all these processes are there. So spiritual practices actually mean a hankering for God alone, a longing for Him alone. By discarding this world, that means you must no more be deluded by this world and worldly things and worldly entanglements. The more you turn towards the world, towards the worldly things, the more mind gets entangled. The more it gets entangled, the more difficult it is for you to purify it. So you must forget all thoughts of name and fame, physical comfort, all sorts of these things, even one's own existence. We should have no anxiety about lives here or hereafter, or about anything else. God will reveal himself out of his mercy to one who wants him in such a way. Success does not come in a day. We should go on practicing like this with a simple heart, and everything will come all right. The main thing that matters is to live with God. Are we doing that? To live with God. We live with people, we live with things, we live with our kith and kin, children, anybody, everybody. In what manner we are living with God? So, the important thing is we must learn to live with God in various ways and forever. How? With the help of japa, with the help of meditation, with the help of prayers, with the help of spiritual thoughts, studying scriptures and discourses about God. All these are various methods to live with God. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the breeze of his grace is always blowing. We should take advantage of it by unfurling the sails. Unfurling the sails is meant self-effort and spiritual discipline. Spiritual discipline will prepare the mind for divine grace. So it is very important. Spiritual discipline, in other words, is nothing but the bringing together of the scattered mind. The next point, very important point, Sri Ramakrishna said, surrender everything at the feet of God. Give him the power of attorney. Once you do it wholeheartedly, from that moment onwards, be very careful about what you are doing, what you are thinking, what you are speaking, etc. Let the Supreme God do whatever he thinks best. Sri Ramakrishna tells, if you rely on a great man, he will never injure you. So what to speak of God? When you are relying upon God, God will certainly see how you are making progress in spiritual life. So first point he said was spiritual discipline, the importance of spiritual discipline. so that you can develop knowledge, so that you can cultivate devotion to God. With this attitude in the mind, if you are in a householder life, it doesn't matter. You have become a butter. You are not drowned by the worldliness. You are able to sail through the ocean of worldly life. The second point he said, surrender to him wholeheartedly. And third point, Sri Ramakrishna tells, there are so many approaches, as Sri Ramakrishna himself has pointed out, as many faiths, so many paths. True. But the most easy way for the people to follow, Sri Ramakrishna is suggesting you develop some kind of relationship with God, master and servant attitude. Consider God as your master and you be as a servant of him. Why the idea of servant is brought here? Because the main obstruction in spiritual life is our ego. It's a stumbling block. That ego cannot be crushed unless you have different attitude. So to humiliate the ego, you must adopt this attitude of being servant of God. Then the ego will not raise its head. And Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of Hanuman. All the time he was thinking about Sri Rama. His whole mind was on Ramachandra. He was ready to carry out whatever the commands of Sri Ram. He developed such tremendous faith, having that attitude. I am the servant of Sri Rama. So just by uttering Master's name, he could cross over the ocean without any bridge. And lastly, Sri Ramakrishna has said, unswerving devotion to one ideal is important. Unswerving devotion to one ideal. Fix the ideal, devote it to it. So these are the methods by which Sri Ramakrishna helped the devotees to develop spiritual aptitude and enjoy peace and joy. The embodiment of all religions, Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to the Divine Spirit to remove all our ignorance, mortality. We have been studying chapter 18 of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. While talking with devotees, Sri Ramakrishna gave many spiritual instructions. As long as one's mind is turned to the outer world, one must accept Kali. That means divine power, divine mother. The power is always feminine, and that divine power is called by Kali, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, and so on. As long as we are fully aware of the outer world, that means we are in a state of duality. We see multiple things, we see many things around us. Then we should discriminate between good and evil, accept good and reject evil. When we are in the relative plane of this world, we have to apply our intellect properly to find out what is good and what is bad. And we should take all steps to curb evil tendencies. Unless the mind is thoroughly purified, it is very difficult to have any experience in spiritual life. Whether God with form or God without form, it's all immaterial. Any spiritual achievement is to be followed by the purity of the heart. So, the most important point in spiritual life is given to the purification. In short, purification means to make the mind free from worldliness. How far we are able to do that? How far the attachment towards my family, my people, my home, my thing, my and mine, all these things, this possession. How far we are able to disidentify ourselves with these things, that determines the purification of the heart. When you identify yourself to certain things of the world, it means that portion of the mind is given to those things. To that extent, the mind is not done completely pure. So it is suggested how to get rid of the evil tendencies, how to get rid of the evil atmosphere. Everything has got a place, surrounding, atmosphere, place, everything is very important when it comes to the point of practicing spirituality. It is not simply without reason that the temples are built. It is with the specific purpose of practicing spirituality the temples are being constructed, where the temple services are being done regularly, so that people can have direct inspiration, can feel that presence of God, can feel that divine atmosphere in the place. So anyway, here it is suggested that much singing of the holy names, particularly Ram Nam, Shiv Nam and Krishna Sankirtan and bhajans should be done. By constantly singing the divine names, and by consciously doing them, that amounts to purification of the place. Evil spirits cannot stand the name of God. They cannot stand. They are wiped away by the power of the divine name. If evil thoughts come to your mind, don't pay any heed to them. They are impressions of past lives in the mind. And now and then they come to the conscious plane. Be very definite about that and just ignore them. Never pay any attention to any evil thought that might crop up in the mind. Never get disturbed that way at all. If you ignore them, they won't give you any trouble. If you give any attention to them, they become very prominent and they cause all sorts of difficulties. So, pray to the Lord for strength, for knowledge and dispassionateness. These are very important in spiritual life. Pray to Him with all your heart for His grace and for devotion and faith. If the prayer is done sincerely, if you are praying willingly, honestly, that prayer will be surely heard and it will be responded accordingly. Suppose a seed is there. It's easy to destroy it. But when it has germinated and grown into a big, strong tree, it requires great strength and effort to chop it down. So, we must crush all undesirable and bad desires in their early, undeveloped stages. We must keep down undesirable thoughts in the germ state by extinguishing them beneath thoughts of an opposite nature. That is how we should conquer all evil tendencies. Hatred with love, anger with kindness, and so on. In fact, where is the location of the evil? Is it in the world? Where is it? It is not in the world, it is in the persons. A suspicious mind sees evil everywhere. A trusting mind sees only good. A quarrelsome person constantly finds something to quarrel about. Some persons always want to argue. Then there are oversensitive persons. They are always on the defensive. Whatever general statement you make, they take as being directed towards them to attack them. All these are causes of evil. It's all a matter of misunderstanding. If we understand each other better, there would be less evil. To the good, the world is full of good, but to the bad, the world is full of evil. The fact is, the world is neither good nor bad. What I call good, you perhaps call bad, and the reverse. Where is the standard? The standard is in our own attitude towards life. Each one has his own standard, and with increased experience and insight, the standard changes. The pity is that we still recognize evil. When we become perfectly good ourselves, the whole world will appear good. We see only the reflection of our own minds. So, the Master says, see the Lord always in everything and you will see no evil. Evil qualities pollute the mind of a person who searches for the lapses and shortcomings of others. Cultivate your discrimination and conscience. How can you struggle against evil tendencies if your intellect is not trained to differentiate between good and evil? First, clear out the rubbish which has entered the mind through the gates of the sense organs, and then put a signboard, no admittance, in front of each gate. Says Swami Adbhutananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Those bad thoughts which ignore the notice and still come in, you will have to hand over to the police, which is our conscience. With the help of the police, you must evict the impure tendencies from the mind and then install the Lord there. Swami Vijnanandaji, another direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he said, Sri Ramakrishna is a living embodiment of purity. Contemplate on him. Repeat his divine name. That will make you free from all evil thoughts. The mind goes up on a higher plane. The Kundalini is aroused. Never give way to evil thoughts. When they come, pray earnestly to the Master, and you will be rid of them. So, this is the most important, significant teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. As long as we are conscious of this world, as long as we are in this world seems to be real. So, how to manage when we are in this world? We have to be intelligent and use our faculties properly. So, there will be always light and darkness, good and evil. Select the good, reject the evil. Secondly, Sri Ramakrishna said, follow one path rightly, then you can reach God. Then if you want, you can learn about all the other paths. It is like reaching the roof by some means or other. Then one is able to climb down by the wooden or stone stairs, by a bamboo pole or even by a rope. But when you are on the path, have a definite path, don't deviate yourself here and there. Go straight in that path until you reach the goal. Then all the things will be clarified. No need to worry about them. You will know the whole secret. Whatever path you may follow, reach the same goal. A jnani, a bhakta, man who is adept in meditation, the man who is adept in selfless service, they all meet at the same point. Realization of God. Experiencing the divinity of the soul, unity of existence. But if you keep on changing the path, instead of going forward, you will not be able to move an inch forward. You will be just moving about here and there, getting more and more confusion, and the mind gets into a state of utter confusion. So, Sri Ramakrishna points out, there are so many paths. Let there be any number of paths. You follow what path you want, go ahead. Don't criticize about other paths. Don't try to know what is there in that path. Don't poke your nose here and there. Pay attention to your path. Go straight. It's very important teaching. First you attain peace of mind. First you attain the truth. Then everything will be known to you. Somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna a question. It is said, grace is very important. How does one receive the grace of God? Sri Ramakrishna answered, constantly chant the name and glories of God and give up worldly thoughts as much as you can. That's very important. What is happening is our worldly thoughts outweigh our thoughts on God and spirituality. So, you can't expect any progress. So you have to prepare yourself to receive the grace. That means spiritual discipline is essential. If you say, I can't do that, then I will say, you will not get it. Finished. Question is answered. Why? Swami Chidananda, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, in the course of his talks with disciples, he said, God sees your mind. See how important it is, how the important position is given to the mind, but how we have neglected the mind. God sees your mind. He becomes gracious where he sees sincere craving. And Shivanji Maharaj says, there is no injustice in his domain. One can see him just because he condescends to reveal himself out of his infinite mercy. This is his grace. Not only does he love his devotees, but he is a very ocean of compassion. I am telling you, as long as you are in the realm of the creation, you will have to accept the forms of God. There is no other way. You can understand God only through your own feelings. You need to know what is compassion. You need to know what is meant by love. Then only you will be able to comprehend the truth. Swami Subodhananji, another direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he said, when we see the sun, how do we see? We see it with the sun's own light. No other light is required for that. Thus also we see the Lord through His grace alone. Another dead disciple, Swami Ramakrishna, said that it is very important that we hold on to our regular spiritual disciplines and be ready to receive God any moment. Be waiting for the God's grace to come upon. His grace dawns when He sees that we really love Him and want Him only, and not lust and gold. If you are running for lust and gold, that means you really do not want Him. You want Him so that He may give you little more gold, little more things to enjoy, little more good body, good tongue to eat, good senses to enjoy more pleasures. That's all. To that extent you want God. Then you pat on God. When the mind is entirely engrossed with worldly objects, what's the use of making a lip prayer to God? Your whole life you may be praying, but yields no fruit. Such shallow love cannot move the heart of God. You must get rid of hypocrisy when you come to God. The mind will be pure and simple when there is no hypocrisy, like that of a child. If you are able to maintain that level, you will be blessed with His grace. Another important teaching Sri Ramakrishna said, too much reasoning injures the spiritual life. Too much of reasoning. Morning to night, keep on talking. Even 24 hours is not enough. Cry to God with a longing heart. The first thing necessary is the vision of God. Then comes reasoning about the scriptures and the world, whatever you want, you reason out afterwards. First you do the first thing. Otherwise, mind leads one astray. We call it as tarka in Sanskrit. Tarka is not good. So, and finally Sri Ramakrishna says, everything can be achieved through bhakti alone. These are the words of Sri Ramakrishna, the personification of knowledge. So, people need not have any kind of superiority and inferiority complex. Jnani is more superior to bhakta. Bhakta is inferior to jnani. All these divisions are made by men of impure hearts, men who have not realized the truth. These are the words of Sri Ramakrishna. He is telling everything can be achieved through bhakti alone. Knowledge of Brahman is also certainly achieved by that way. That means everything can be realized simply through love of God. Cultivate the love of God. That's all the purpose of religion. How you can cultivate that love. How we can separate yourself from the world in spite of your living in the world. How you should dissociate yourself from worldly ties even though you are bound by chains of bondage. So religion shows the way. You must follow it up if you really want God.